Charles Dickens's Oliver Twist is populated by a vivid cast of characters that represent both the grim underbelly of Victorian London and the enduring possibility of human decency amidst suffering. Among these figures, Bill Sikes stands out as one of Dickens's most fearsome villains. Unlike Fagin, who is manipulative and calculating, or Monks, who is driven by greed and a desire for inheritance, Sikes embodies brute force, unrestrained violence, and the terrifying consequences of unchecked criminality. His role in the narrative, symbolic significance, and broader implications extend well beyond his individual actions, making him both a character and a cultural archetype of evil. Role in the narrative. Bill Sikes serves primarily as the physical menace of the novel. Where Fagin relies on persuasion and cunning to control his gang of child thieves, Sikes enforces his will with fists, threats, and brute intimidation. From his introduction, he is presented as a man whose very presence generates fear. Dickens describes him in dark, animalistic terms, a hulking, scowling figure whose rough exterior mirrors his inner savagery. His dog, Bullseye, mirrors his personality, a vicious creature whose loyalty is mingled with brutality, reinforcing Sikes's violent identity. Narratively, Sikes functions as the most immediate and dangerous antagonist to Oliver. Unlike Monks, who plots behind the scenes, or Fagin, who manipulates through subtle coercion, Sikes poses a direct physical threat. He drags Oliver into burglary, treats him with casual cruelty, and becomes the embodiment of the oppressive world that seeks to consume Oliver's innocence. In one of the most shocking turns of the novel, Sikes murders Nancy, one of the few characters who attempts to help Oliver. Her death not only cements Sikes as a monstrous figure, but also escalates the novel's dramatic tension, propelling events toward resolution. His violent end, falling to his death while attempting to flee from those seeking justice, serves as both narrative closure and moral reckoning. In life, Sikes terrorizes others. In death, he becomes an object of terror himself, desperately trying to escape his guilt and fate. Symbolic significance. Sikes's symbolic weight in Oliver Twist is profound. Dickens constructs him not merely as a criminal, but as the personification of unrefined, destructive violence. He represents the raw, physical force that sustains the criminal underworld. Where Fagin symbolizes corruption through manipulation, Sikes represents corruption through brutality. Together, they illustrate two sides of evil, the scheming intellect and the unthinking fist. Nancy's murder is the pivotal symbolic act that defines Sikes. In killing her, he extinguishes one of the few sparks of compassion and humanity within the criminal circle. Nancy, though a fallen woman, demonstrates loyalty, love, and moral courage in her attempts to protect Oliver. Her murder by Sikes thus becomes the destruction of mercy by violence. Symbolically, it represents the crushing of conscience by savagery, a moment that reverberates through the remainder of the novel. Furthermore, Sikes embodies the theme of dehumanization. Dickens repeatedly associates him with animalistic imagery. His growling speech, his brutal fists, and his association with Bullseye. In this sense, Sikes symbolizes the reduction of humanity to instinct, aggression, and appetite. He is not guided by morality, reason, or higher ideals but by impulse and force. This stripping away of civilized veneer positions him as a warning about what unchecked criminality and social neglect can produce. Broader implications. While Sikes is clearly a villain, Dickens's portrayal of him invites broader reflection on the social conditions of Victorian England. The novel consistently suggests that crime is not merely an individual failing, but also a social disease. Fagin's gang, Monks's schemes, and Sikes's violence all emerge from the poverty and degradation of London's underclass. Sikes, therefore, can be read not just as a personal villain but as a social product. A man hardened by deprivation, brutalized by his environment, and shaped into a weapon of fear. His relationship with Nancy further illuminates questions of gender and power. Sikes's domination of Nancy illustrates the intersection of class oppression and patriarchal violence. Nancy is trapped in a world where her loyalty to Sikes becomes her doom. Dickens portrays her murder in harrowing detail, emphasizing the cruelty of male violence against women. Sikes's brutality thus underscores a broader Victorian anxiety about domestic abuse, power imbalance, and the vulnerability of women in oppressive structures. Moreover, Sikes's eventual downfall embodies Dickens's moral framework. Evil cannot escape judgment. The psychological torment that consumes him after Nancy's murder reflects Dickens's interest in conscience as an inescapable force. Sikes may be unrepentant, but he is not immune to guilt. His paranoia, hallucinations, and desperate attempts to flee suggest that inner torment is as punishing as external justice. This psychological collapse foreshadows the Victorian fascination with crime and morality, where punishment is as much internal as it is external. Finally, Sikes resonates as a broader cultural archetype, the brutal thug who relies on violence rather than cunning. In later literature and popular culture, echoes of Sikes can be found in countless depictions of the criminal brute, the gangster, the abusive partner, the violent enforcer. Dickens's Sikes thus transcends the novel, becoming a template for how literature represents raw violence. Conclusion: Bill Sikes in Oliver Twist is more than a villain. He is the embodiment of unrestrained violence, the brutal counterpart to the manipulative Fagin and the scheming monks. Within the narrative, he serves as Oliver's most immediate threat, while symbolically he represents the annihilation of compassion and the degradation of humanity into animal savagery. On a broader level, Sikes illustrates Dickens's concerns with social conditions, gendered violence, and the moral consequences of crime. His eventual downfall dramatizes the inescapable judgment that Dickens believed awaited those who surrendered wholly to brutality. In the end, Sikes's terrifying presence and catastrophic choices secure his place as one of Dickens's most memorable creations. This figure continues to embody the darkest possibilities of human nature and the destructive power of unchecked violence.